Richard Rodgers with a walk-off touchdown. Total disbelief at Ford Field.
He may go all the way to the 20 down the right side, and there's Randall Cobb to the 5, to the end zone, to the touchdown. Oh my goodness.
Welcome to the Green and Golden Boys, a Packers podcast for fans who are excited that the Green Bay Packers are still in the playoff hunt. This is Marcus, and with me as always is Charles. Charles, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
Doing well. We are recapping a Packers victory. On Monday Night Football, the Packers beat the LA Rams 24-12, and as of right now, Packers are still alive. How do we feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said to preview this this game, it doesn't feel like we were even remotely thinking about the playoffs just 2 weeks ago. But a lot can happen apparently on a bye week, and all of a sudden the Packers saw a pathway to the playoffs, and a couple of games went their way that they weren't playing in, and then obviously the Packers took care of business in Lambeau against LA. It's awesome. Meaningful football is fun in December.
Meaningful football is fun in December. And speaking of fun in December, and this is a Packers podcast, and we are in Minnesota. So this isn't going to happen very often, but Charles, I feel like I need to give a shout out to the Minnesota Vikings for the largest comeback in NFL history against the Indianapolis Colts. And not coincidentally, probably against Matt Ryan, who now has the largest comeback in NFL history and the largest comeback in Super Bowl history, both on the losing side.
Yes. Yeah, that's I was listening to the game on the radio with Paul Allen, who's a very good announcer, but he was asked what was cooler, that comeback against the Colts or the crazy win that that the Vikings had in Buffalo, and he said the Colts because it was a home game and it was the NFL record-setting game. I still think the Colts are a very bad team, and hey, more power to them. They came back 36-3 or whatever it was at the one point, but it was still a bad team. So, I mean, maybe this is my bias, just hating on the Vikings, but the fact that they were even in that position.
Bad team or not, they were a bad team was beating the Vikings at halftime by 33 points. Yeah. Any way you slice it, that is an incredible comeback. So shout out to them. True. You know, credit where credit is due. That's all we're going to talk about the Vikings today. Just thought it was my duty as a fan to give them a little quick shout out, because that is pretty incredible. No matter who it was against or who was on the winning end. But anyway, let's talk about the Packers. Let's talk about the Packers Rams. I guess first of all, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it's there were some positives, a lot of positives, some negatives. Obviously, positive number one, this is a win, and the Packers needed to win to keep their playoff hopes alive. At the end of the day, that's all you can really ask for. Now, it wasn't a very good Rams team. They were missing essentially their three of their four best players, I would say. Jalen Ramsey's probably their second or third best player, but it's a win nonetheless. The offense seemed to be clicking a little bit, I don't know if it's the day of the game or the day before the game, the Packers released Sammy Watkins, and we kind of had our ideal quintet of receivers out there for the first time all season, probably.
Yeah, no, I think that is honestly one of the first times we had all season. Speaking of Sammy Watkins, though, do you think it had more to do that all our receivers were healthy, or do you think Sammy Watkins saying in a podcast that the season would have gone differently if Christian Watson caught that first ball in Minnesota? Do you think that contributed to his release?
I didn't know he said that. I can't imagine that was going to rile any feathers. I feel like Aaron Rodgers is always sort of speculating. I mean, he said it in the last couple of podcasts, if they had Keyshawn Nixon at the beginning of the season, maybe things would have been different.
That's Aaron Rodgers. That's not Sammy Watkins saying it.
True, but I think it probably has more to do with Sammy Watkins. Like you look at his playing time, his snaps, and his targets the last 5 weeks, and they've just gone down. He just doesn't seem to be getting on the same page with Aaron Rodgers, and I think he just made too many mistakes out there. Wasn't in the right place. I think it was a lot more to do with his playing than
Yeah.
any comment he made on a podcast.
I,
Honestly.
I think you're 95% right, but I think that might have pushed it over the ledge. But to your
Maybe.
point, the other receivers, I mean, two names that haven't, and they kept talking about it, but I forget the stat now, but they only had like 60 snaps before this. Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson were on the field together, and Romeo looked good. I think you and I, by the way, that's where you were taking the opener. You and I actually watched the game together where the Packers won. And during the game, we were kind of commenting that Dobbs seemed to be going. Yeah, Dobbs seemed to be going down. And Rogers said in the Pat McAfee show that it felt like Dobbs gave up a few yards, but he was very like uplifting, like, hey, like, speaking positively. But I think Rodgers noticed that, and he's catching the ball with his hands, and he's running tight routes, and I think we have two really good receivers, and it's going to be fun to watch them again in these meaningful games coming up here. But then kind of in the future, in the next couple of seasons, it's going to be fun to have receivers.
Yeah, I think everyone is really excited about this duo. Romeo Doubs was actually our highest graded offensive player during that game, which is really, really fun to see, with an 89.1. I think he gave up a couple of yards. He kind of gave himself up a few times, maybe slipped once, but he just kind of snatches. You watch guys catch the ball, and he's one of those guys that just kind of seems to snatch the ball out of midair. Where a lot of some guys are body catchers, some guys kind of let the ball come to them. He just goes up and gets it, which is, I think, what you really want to see with a young receiver, especially.
Yep.
So once those two guys get a little bit more polished, this could be a dangerous duo. Maybe as dangerous as the upcoming wide receiver duo we're going to see against the Dolphins, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think another positive we have to talk about is the defense. I mean, there were a couple of boneheaded plays, obviously some unsportsmanlike, conduct penalties where guys are tackling guys out of the end zone, or I'm sorry, on the sideline after they're out of bounds. But they held the Rams to 156 total yards, and I don't know if that happens every year or how often that happens, but anytime you can do that and keep your opponent to 12 points is a pretty solid effort.
Yeah, I think going into the game, we were more concerned about the Rams defense and not so much the Rams offense. But this defense has given up yards to just about everyone. So to your point, keeping anyone, whether it's your first or second game, Baker Mayfield, with this new team, I think that regardless, keeping a team, to your point, to 12 points is impressive. And when the offense wasn't clicking or wasn't scoring early on, it was key to have some of those defensive stops early in the game. The game kind of turned into a blowout. In fact, the score actually shows the game closer than it really was. If I remind you, the Packers were kneeling the ball down on the 1 yard line.
Right.
It was really a 30-point plus game if they wanted it to be. So, well done. Way to do what you were expected to do. I mean, that's the only thing that makes me a little bit nervous. I mean, looking ahead, we're gonna have to play better than that to get two of these next 3 wins coming up here. So we did what we needed to do, but there's still some things that we can do to clean it up.
Yep, I agree. A couple of not so good things. I mean, we talked a little bit about the penalties. I mean, some of these boneheaded penalties, just undisciplined kind of, and I don't know if I would even call them uncharacteristic, because I feel like we see it a lot this year, but just the defense in particular really needs to settle down, especially when they're, things are getting chippy. It's just, I know it's easy for us to sit here and say it, but just you feel like you gotta walk away, and at the very least you can't body slam an opponent when you're tackling them. You can't, when you're 5 feet out of bounds, you can't finish a tackle or push a guy into a coach or push a coach. This stuff needs to stop, because those penalties are going to be way more costly as games get tighter and tighter here down the stretch.
Yep. 100%. I think the other bad, and you wrote it down here on the notes, but a couple of miscommunications. You wrote down turnovers here on bad, but some of those miscommunications led to those turnovers, right? I mean, Aaron Rodgers basically throwing the ball away, it felt like. There's some debate on whose fault that was. And then Aaron Jones fumbling the ball. I kind of thought, watching it live, they would have blown the whistle dead because of his forward progress, but
right.
A couple of turnovers and a couple of miscommunications that led to those turnovers. I mean, before you talk about the turnover specifically, I'm sure you heard the news or the article in the Athletic about Rodgers' hand signals and so on and so forth. And Rodgers dismissed it pretty quickly, which I tend to believe that Rodgers is good at being a quarterback in this league, and he's not trying to trick his players, basically. But we saw it in this game, a miscommunication between him and Watson that led to an incomplete pass that last drive. Do you make anything of that article or any of those hand signals, or have you read too much about it yet?
I mean, I think that like most other sports, you're going to have to communicate with guys, whether it's a third base coach when you're hitting in baseball or your quarterback trying to signal at the goal line. There are going to be changes. And, basically what I've heard and what I heard Aaron say is like, well, yeah, you got to need to change these things on a weekly or biweekly basis, because if rubbing his right arm at the goal line means Christian Watson turn around and this is going to be a quick out to you, you don't want that same signal to mean the same thing the next week. So there's not really a lot you can do unless you're practicing it during the week. So, it looks like it was just a call that he missed, and that happens sometimes, and he's a rookie. That's going to happen. So those are the types of things that I think as Rodgers plays more and more with these guys that they're going to kind of resolve. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, I think the article probably made more of it than it really is, because it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, I mean, this is it was a missed call. It happens.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, and we'll talk about the Dolphins in a little bit later on or the next episode, but that one play might be the difference of our playoff hopes, right? I mean, the Dolphins are a better team than the Rams coming up here. So, I mean, everything's going to have to be tight. Everything's going to have to be cleaner. And hopefully everyone's on the same page next week. One thing that I wanted to talk about, though, one discussion point for you is, does 255 games mean anything to you, Marcus?
It does mean something to me. I know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Should I share with the audience, or
do it?
Okay. Well, I believe that is a tie. Mason Crosby tied Brett Favre for the number of games started as a Green Bay Packer. Am I correct?
You are correct. So this next game, he will break Brett Favre's record. And when I first heard it, my initial reaction was, yeah, but he's he's a kicker, right? He's not getting contact. I mean, Brett Favre, no one will break that on the quarterback side, right? Just because
probably
literally the protocols now with concussions and so on. So I kind of immediately said, like, well, it's not a tough guy position, so therefore it's not as cool. But then I was thinking about it, and I actually heard another opinion on this, and it changed my mind completely. If you're Aaron Rodgers and you sign a 3-year, $150 million deal, if you have 4, 5, 6, 7 bad games in the middle of that deal, guess what? The Packers are sticking with you, and you're starting all those games, right? Whereas a kicker, he's had to earn a couple 1-year, 2-year extensions for a lot of his career. So,
yeah,
so not only has he, I mean, he's basically competing every year for his job. I know everyone says that's how it happens with every player, but that's not true, right? Jair Alexander was going to be the starting corner on the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers was going to be the starting quarterback this year, but there was a time in April where, with an injury with Crosby, I mean, we didn't know if he was actually going to start this year, or when he had a bad year last year, or a few years before that he had a bad year. I mean, kudos to him of basically earning his job every year, and hopefully, unless something weird happens in the next couple of days, breaking Brett Favre's record. So congrats to Mason Crosby.
Yeah, that's a huge accomplishment. I agree. Congratulations to him. And, like you said, one more game, he'll break the record, and then he'll be also still the Packers' leading scorer all time, I believe. So shout out to Mason Crosby. It's pretty incredible. All right, why don't we move on and preview this Miami Dolphins game? There's no doubt that the win against the Rams was it was necessary. The Packers need to win out. On paper, this probably looks like the most difficult game, for the rest of this regular season, just because this is a good Dolphins team. I feel like they faltered a little bit over this last month, but they're coming off a huge game against the Bills. They didn't win, but I mean, it was a kind of a down to the wire battle, and minus a call or two, they could have won that game. I guess a couple of things I want to note. It's in Miami. but it's only going to be about 60 degrees at kickoff. So I think that probably plays in the Packers' favor a little bit, wouldn't you?
I think it plays in their favor. I think it plays in, just like this last game, though. Well, not. I think it plays in everyone's favor. If it's 95 degrees, I don't think even the Miami players are loving that. So yeah, I think that's a win for us. But I don't think it's going to be a determining factor necessarily. You just brought up the last game about how the Dolphins lost a close game to the Bills, where they were leading, I think, most of that fourth quarter. They had just lost a tight game against the Chargers, and they had lost before that against the 49ers. So I hate to say it, this is a get-right game for the Dolphins, and I'm a little worried about getting, I don't want to say blown out, but I'm a little worried about getting blown out down in Miami.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a tough game no matter how you slice it. Yeah, I think you're right. We're going to get their best shot. I mean, they're still playing for playoff seeding. That they're coming off not a debilitating loss, but a demoralizing loss a little bit, because like you said, they were leading that game, and it's an AFC opponent, and they were right there. So we're probably going to get their best shot. A couple players I want to talk about. We mentioned them before, but this Miami Dolphins team has kind of an incredible dynamic wide receiver duo in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I don't know if you knew this, but I was researching this team, and those two have combined for 2,646 yards this season. That is more than the rest of all of their pass catchers combined.
Oh, jeez.
Combined. That is absolutely. They're already both at over 1,000 yards with 3 games left to play.
Yeah.
That is pretty incredible. They are a force to be reckoned with. Obviously, Tyreek Hill. We've seen him a couple times when he was a Kansas City Chief, and he is, one of the probably fastest players in the NFL. And as we know, speed kills in this league, and those are 2 guys that we're going to need to try and shut down if we have any chance at winning this game, I think.
I mean, I hate to say it, but I do think this actually is the key to the game. I didn't watch the Bills game too closely, but I did watch that Chargers-Dolphins game, basically the whole game. And the Dolphins kind of refused to run the ball. So ironically, oddly, them forcing the ball to their best receivers is either going to blow us out, or it might be the key to our success. Jair Alexander, in particular, has been burned on a couple of these routes, but he also has the most interceptions that he's had all year. So I think if we can have a game of our lives in the secondary and shut them down and keep them to the sidelines, Joe Barry's defense seems to have a hard time shutting down that center of the field defensively. If we can control Tyreek Hill a little bit and Waddle a little bit, I think that gives us our best success, chances for success, because that means there's a couple 3-and-outs on their end, and then our offense is on the field instead of theirs. What do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree with you, but what I'll say is, I think they're going to alter their game plan a little bit against us. We're one of the worst teams against the run in the NFL, and kind of a boogeyman from a couple of years ago is now a Miami Dolphin, and that's Raheem Mostert. And he, if you guys remember, in the 2019 NFC Championship game, he ran for 220 yards against us and scored 4 touchdowns. Yep. So this is a Packer killer, and I think they're going to try to open up the passing game by running the ball through him. And I think, again, they're looking at the Green Bay Packers as one of the worst rushing defenders in the league, and I think that's going to be their game plan, and that's what concerns me, maybe even more than these 2 wide receivers. Because I think, to your point, if they're forcing it to them all day long, then we've got a better shot. But if they're, if the offense is running through Mostert all game, then I think we're in trouble.
Yeah, and I hope they don't change their game plan, because like I said, I mean, it just seemed odd to me. I mean, a lot of these, and you're right, we are one of the worst, if the worst, run defense out there. But it's still a passing league and a passing team, and it just sometimes teams just kind of force some things, and it takes 1 3-and-out and then 1 long 8-minute sustained drive with Dobbs and Christian and AJ Dillon hopefully is playing. And Rodgers. I mean, we only need them to make the mistake once or twice in that first half, and then the game can kind of be in our control. So I'm hoping they get a little greedy on us.
Yeah, and we'll see how it goes. But whatever they end up doing, they have possibly maybe an MVP candidate on their hands at the quarterback position in Tua Tagovailoa. He has I believe it's a career high passer rating this season at 107.8. He has been playing really well. You know, he got knocked out a couple of games with a concussion. As we know, you know, NFL is gonna kind of review their and probably change their rules for that because of that incident. But you know, he's slinging the ball really well this year. He's somebody we have to keep an eye on. But I think the positive there is he's not really a running quarterback. You know, he's more of a pocket passer. So again, I think that plays to our favor a little bit. This last week, you know, our defense was getting some pressure on Baker Mayfield, which was nice to see. Preston Smith had a couple of sacks for the first time in a while.
He's got like 4 sacks in as many games, I think. He's kind of turning it on the last couple of days.
Yeah, which is great to see. But, you know, this is a solid Dolphins offensive line. I mean, I think they've only allowed like 30 sacks this entire year, which is like in the top 10 in the NFL. So it's not going to be, you know, an easy task, you know, for our pass rushers. But I think we, you know, we'll have an opportunity to get a little bit of pressure on him.
Yeah. Yeah. I like I said, I just have this feeling, and I so hope I'm right. I just have this feeling that they're going to try and get greedy and try and make this a statement game, right? And throw the ball on us. And again, if we can just have a couple of plays go our way, maybe a turnover or two, I think, and again, get one good offensive drive on our side. You know, I think this is a team that's has abandoned the run before, and I hope we see it again on Sunday.
Yep, and you know, one thing I think we did against the Rams is I forget what it was, 8 games maybe, where we scored on our opening drive of our opening possession or opening drive. It was some ridiculous drought, and I think if we can get ahead and kind of dictate the tempo, then we've got an opportunity. But if we're playing from behind, that's going to kind of, you know, I think advantage Dolphins. But
it was a touchdown. It's been like since last season that we haven't scored a touchdown in our opening drive. You're right. Yeah, I forgot about that. And we were on the 2-yard line, and then we followed it up with an incomplete, then a sack, I think. Oh, yeah, you're right. I mean, man, it's gonna have to be tight. It's gonna have to be clean, and we can't give away points in the red zone.
This is just kind of an interesting stat that I found when I was researching for this game, is that the Dolphins have the exact same points per game and points scored, or points against per game and points scored per game at 24.6. So they have a completely even average point differential this season, which is kind of
interesting.
An interesting stat, especially for a team that's 8-6. But I guess they're only, you know, one away from 500. So I just thought that was interesting that I'd mention that. But you know, again, they've got a top 5, probably top 6 offense. But their defense, like I just mentioned, is averaging 24.6 games against this season. So, you know, teams have been able to score on
how many points?
24.6 per game.
Do you think if we score 25 points, let's round up, do you think if we score 25 we win the game, or do you think the number's higher?
That's a good question. I've got the Packers scoring 24 points. So that's kind of where I am, but you may be right. Maybe we need to get to that 25th.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, yeah, it's just interesting to me because it feels like, yeah, I guess their record kind of reflects that even average, right? I mean, they're a very good team, but they are definitely not undefeated, right, by any means. So, that's interesting. Offensively for us, I mean, is there anything I think you're looking for us to score that many points, those 24 points that you have us winning by?
You know, I don't want to keep, you know, selecting the same guy every week. I feel like we're pretty, you know, that selection is pretty, the pool is slim. I'm gonna say Alan Lazard, because we saw Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson getting a lot of attention last week. We saw Aaron Rodgers airmail one way over Alan Lazard's head, which could have been a huge gain. And I think as our number 3 receiver, that's kind of his sweet spot. And I think if he has, you know, if the Dolphins are kind of focused on those other 2 guys, that's going to open up Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb and give them some opportunities for some big conversions and some big catches. So Allen Lazard is my player on offense to watch. How about you?
Well, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go special teams. To win this game, the guy who's got to have himself another great game is our guy, Keyshawn Nixon.
K9.
You and I were like, what the heck? That was a weird little squib with 50 seconds left in the half, I think it was. We were like, that was weird, whatever. And then we saw a little pooch kick later. And it wasn't until someone else told me, they're like, yeah, man, they were kicking away from Keyshawn Nixon. And Aaron Rodgers said after the game that he doesn't remember the time.
Last time that happened.
Right. And apparently John Kuhn was also saying it on the sideline. So it was pretty funny. So, I mean, think about that. Teams are kicking away from Keyshawn Nixon. He had a couple great returns last week against the Rams and a great return with a questionable holding call that doesn't even count to his stats. So, I mean, if we can get the ball on the 50, on our 40-yard line or closer, I mean, heck yeah, man. I think that's going to be our key to the game is just having good field position and then long, consistent drives. I'm not going to say one of the two running backs' names because I say it every week, but just running the ball. And honestly, if we have more offensive plays than them and them being the more explosive team, I think that's another recipe for success. Is let's just do. I mean, it's weird to say this as a Packer fan because it's usually the other way around in the last few years. We want, other teams are saying, hey, best defense is Aaron Rodgers on the sideline. Whatever we can do to keep Tyreek Hill on the sideline, I think that is very key. So long sustained drives and starting them up with a good field position with Keyshawn Nixon returning kicks and punts.
All right, love it. Well, why don't you give us the over/under?
All right. Well, the over/under is 49 and a half points, and the Dolphins are favored by 3.5. And I'll say this again: usually the home team gets 3 points. So really, from like a talent standpoint, the odds makers are looking at this as a very even game and just giving the hand to the Dolphins because they're home. Who do you got winning? You already told us, but what's the score?
I've got the Packers winning a tight one, 24-23.
Okay. So, yeah, obviously covering. How much of that is a fan pick and how much of that is your if you were actually putting money on this game?
Well, Chuck, I think I'm a Packers fan first. So I think optimism is winning out here. I was kind of torn on whether or not I wanted to pick the Packers or the Dolphins. I feel like in my brain, I think the Dolphins have the advantage and are probably going to win. But
okay,
my emotions are telling me, and my heart is telling me, the Packers have to do it. This is an opportunity, and I think all I want for Christmas is a Packers victory. So I think it's more the heart leading the head.
I love it. Well, I think the Packers have a chance to win. I think they could go down to Miami and they could pull it off. I don't think it's going to happen. I have the Packers losing, unfortunately, basically ending their playoff hopes, 24-17 Dolphins. I just don't see us. Nothing this season has proven that we can put multiple halves together, let alone multiple games. And yes, that was a step forward against a very bad Rams team, and I just think that their talent level is going to be too great for our defense. I think our offense is, you don't know what you're getting with our offense, and I think we can do it if the right Packers team comes out. But I don't think it's actually gonna happen. But I will say this, Marcus: if the Packers do go down to Miami and win this game, I am very confident that the other things outside of the Packers' control, like Seattle losing one more game and the Commanders losing 2 more games, I think those 2 things happen. So I think if the Packers win out, I think we make the playoffs. And I think, this is a lot of eyes, but if we go down and win in Miami, I think we win against Minnesota and Green Bay, and I think we win against the Lions in Green Bay. And all of a sudden, we're coming to Minneapolis for a freaking wild card game against the Vikings, and we're going to go all the way to the freaking Super Bowl! Well, not the last part, but I do stand by. If we go down and win in Miami, I think we win out. I do. I really do.
Okay, so a question for you. we obviously want the Lions to lose too. However, if the Packers win out and the Lions only lose to the Packers, we'll have identical records. Yeah, at 9-8. What am I must be missing what the tiebreaker is, because none of the pundits seem to be mentioning the Lions as far as like we need to lose.
I don't know it offhand, because you're right, none of the pundits are mentioning it. I think it's divisional record first, and then conference record second. And then way down there is a point total differential, which a lot of people were talking about when we were kneeling the ball down on the 1 yard line. So I'm sure that won't come into play, but the fact that the Lions aren't being talked about, and we should be good journalists and do our own research, but us winning must be enough within the division or the conference. It must be.
We'll still hope for a Lions loss against the Panthers this week. Lions are kind of on a hot streak, so it's not looking likely against a bad Panthers team, but we'll hope for it anyway. Seahawks are playing the Chiefs. I'm confident that they're going to lose, I think, because the Chiefs are still playing for seeding, and, I think that's going to be a loss for them. Hoping the Giants lose to the Vikings this week. The Vikings never seem to want to give us any help, but we'll see if they can do something this week. And then go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say I don't think it really matters, because I don't think the Giants are losing the last 3. Like the Giants, because they beat the Commanders, I think we can stop worrying about them. I mean, I guess sure, let's hope for everything to happen right, but the team to watch is the Commanders.
Yep, and they're playing the 49ers, who've kind of ascended these last 5-6 weeks.
Yeah. So and honestly, if they win and what's his name? Massage guy, Watson, there it is. If Watson starts kind of trending upwards, the Commanders could lose against the Browns, and then the Cowboys just lost against someone last week, so they're going to be playing for something at the end of the season. So I mean, I can see the Commanders losing 2 of 3 very easily these last 3 games.
Well, let's hope for the best, prepare for the worst, I guess. But, it all starts this week with the Packers at Miami. So hoping for a victory there. But I think that does it for today. Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of the Green and Golden Boys. Don't forget to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast service. And Chuck, as always, go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.